Hi, everyone. I wanted to do an updated podcast about the minimum recommendations for strength and cardio. So if you are ever in a season of life where you just are time constrained and you don't have the time to put in more of an ideal exercise routine, what is the minimum amount you can do with both strength training and cardio that will elicit gains? And then we'll also talk about what's the minimum you can do to just kind of maintain. Again, if you're going through a season of life, maybe you're sick or whatever it may be, and you just need a less, what is the minimum amount that you can do to both gain fitness and maintain. So first, let's talk about what is ideal. And ideally, you want a routine that incorporates three things: aerobic exercise for mitochondrial, cardiovascular, and metabolic health, high intensity cardio like sprint training for the power benefits and the VO2 max benefits, and a hypertrophy routine that increases lean mass and strength. The ideal depends on the person, your training status, and what you can recover from. So it's going to depend on your lifestyle, nutrition, your age, your training history. All of those things will depend on your ideal. But let's go over some kind of general ideals for each. When it comes to aerobic exercise, we want at a minimum 150 minutes of light to moderate intensity cardio or 75 minutes of vigorous intensity cardio each week. This can go all the way up to 300 minutes of light to moderate intensity cardio or more if you love it and you have the time and it's something that you can easily fit into your life. But that isn't necessary to see improvements in metabolic and cardiovascular health. So that 150 minutes of light to moderate intensity cardio per week or 75 minutes of vigorous intensity cardio per week is generally what we recommend. When it comes to high intensity work, so high intensity training like SIT, so sprint interval training, or HIIT, high intensity interval training, you want 1 to 2 sessions per week. This can include short bursts of all-out effort with rest in between. Your sessions can have anywhere from 2 to 10 intervals in them, and think nice short sessions. So less is more when it comes to HIIT training or SIT training, so 20 minutes or less per session. Finally, resistance training. Having a routine where you're doing 4 or more hard sets per week per muscle group. A hard set is doing each exercise close to failure in 30 reps or less. So each set, I get a lot of questions about this. I don't mean like 3 sets of 10 equaling 30 reps total. I mean each set. So let's say you're doing 3 sets of bicep curls. Each of those sets, you need to be doing 30 reps or less, approaching muscular failure in each of those 3 sets. Any of the Evlo tracks, so the 3, 4, or 5 time per week tracks, will include 4 to 8 hard sets per muscle group per week. More volume, so more than 8 hard sets per week, will lead to faster gains, but you will start to get diminishing returns after around 8 to 10 sets per muscle group per week. The reason we do 4 to 8 sets per muscle group per week in Evlo is because that tends to be a really good kind of sweet spot where a lot of people can recover from and not start to feel broken down and yet still see pretty significant gains. So those are the ideal recommendations for cardio, high intensity work, and strength and hypertrophy work. Let's go over what you can do at a minimum that will drive results. For cardio, so for aerobic exercise, it's difficult to say what the minimum would be in someone that's trained. So if you already exercise, it's difficult to say what the minimum would be. There's not a lot of research about this. But in general, if you have less time, you can increase the intensity. So if you don't have 150 minutes to do light to moderate intensity cardio, you could do something a little bit more intense. So increase your heart rate max just a little bit and decrease the time. Studies show that even small amounts of moderate intensity exercise show benefits. So 60 to 90 minutes of moderate intensity exercise can show pretty significant benefits. This would be exercise that's maybe closer to your 70% heart rate max. It's not the point where you are, huffing and puffing a ton. You are starting to get a little bit uncomfortable. You're breathing harder. You could talk, but not sing. So that tends to be kind of that closer to your moderate range intensity for cardio. One paper noted that 1.5 hours of moderate to vigorous activity per week can reduce mortality by 20%. So that's just an hour and a half of moderate to vigorous exercise per week. The same paper noted that there's still increasing returns when you add more, but the marginal increase is less. So there's diminishing returns when you add more. So to get an additional 20% in mortality, you wouldn't have to double the exercise. So you would think like, okay, if I get 20% by doing 1.5 hours a week, if I just do 3 hours a week, if I double it, I'll get 40% decrease in mortality. But that's not how exercise dosage works because you get diminishing returns. So in order to get a 40% reduction in mortality, you would have to 5x the amount of cardio that you're doing. So you'd have to do 7 hours of moderate to intense exercise per week. So that's good to know, right? Is that something is better than nothing. And when you can, I do recommend getting back to that 150 minutes of light to moderate intensity or the 75 minutes of more moderate to vigorous activity per week. But you can see significant benefits from just doing something. Next, let's shift to high intensity exercise. Sprint training is the best way to improve VO2 max. VO2 max is a great indicator of your overall cardiovascular health, and it's shown to be very effective for longevity. Sprints are a form of exercise done for a short period of time, so maybe around 30 seconds, and they're in an interval fashion. So 30 seconds on with 2 to 3 minutes of rest and then repeat. During this sprint time, you are putting in supramaximal efforts, supramaximal. So this is above the most you can do. I know that seems like it would be impossible, but that's kind of where your thoughts are. Your thoughts are, I'm going to go as hard as I can during this 30 seconds. You can sprint on a bike. You can sprint on an elliptical. You can do jump squats or high knees. You can sprint outside. You can sprint in a pool. There's lots of different ways that you can do these high intensity sprints. You just pick what you like the most. Now, how much of this do you need to do in a week to see results? The amount is shockingly low that you need. A study that I'll link in the show notes showed that you can see a 21% increase in VO2 max after 12 weeks in a protocol where you're only doing 2 to 3 20-second sprints per week. So 2 to 3 20-second sprints per week can increase your VO2 max by 21% after 12 weeks. That's pretty remarkable. However, this study was in individuals who were untrained, so they weren't previously doing sprint interval training. So they were going from 0 sprint interval training up to 2 to 3 20-second sprints per week. So they were going from 0 to that. So that's important to note. If you are someone that already has sprint interval training or HIIT interval training in your routine, what dosage do you need to see further benefits? The answer is not super clear, but we can look at a meta-analysis with elite athletes. So according to this meta that I'll link in the show notes, elite athletes may need more like 6 to 8 sprints 2 times a week to continue to see increases in their VO2 max. So 6 to 8 sprints in one session, 6 to 8 sprints in a second session. That's probably the dosage that they need to see increases in VO2 max. Remember that they've already increased their VO2 max to a significant amount. So further increases are pretty small and incremental. So they need a lot more training in order to see those incremental increases. Now, most of us are not elite athletes and we just want to be healthy and see the metabolic and cardiovascular benefits that something like sprint interval training provides. So if you are someone who has already been doing sprint interval training or HIIT for a long time, you'll probably fall somewhere in the middle. My guess is that you would need one session of 2 30-second sprints per week to maintain and 2 to 3 sessions of 2 to 3 30-second sprints to gain VO2 max improvements. Again, this is all just a guess based on what we know. So you'd have to test it on yourself to see kind of where your minimum dose lies. Finally, let's address resistance training, so strength and hypertrophy. As I've talked about on other podcasts, one hard set per week per muscle group may result in some small changes or some small gains, but a new meta-analysis shows that those changes may be pretty undetectable to the naked eye. This meta claims that more like 4 hard sets per week per muscle group in trained individuals is necessary for detectable muscle growth. Interestingly, this meta spoke about quote unquote fractional sets. So a fractional set is the work to a muscle group that's getting indirect stimulus from an exercise. For example, the triceps may get indirect work when you're doing a chest press. The primary muscle group of a chest press are the pecs, but the triceps do get a little bit of load. So while a chest press may count as one hard set for the chest or for the pecs, it might count as 0.5 sets for the triceps. For the quads, any glute exercise where you're doing like a lunge movement or a squat movement could be a quote unquote fractional set for the quads. So let's say a step up. A step up may be one hard set for the glutes, but maybe it's 0.5 sets for the quads. So this isn't something to obsess about since it's not a perfect science and it's really almost impossible to estimate. The point is, if you're doing things like lunges, chest presses, rows, things that we're doing every single week in Evlo, even though we're primarily targeting one muscle group at a time, you're getting additional benefits to surrounding muscle groups. So all this to say, again, don't overstress about that. The point of this is that you only need 4 hard sets per muscle group per week to see results. So let's break down kind of weekly training recommendations if your goal is to increase fitness. So if your goal is to increase your aerobic health, your VO2 max, and your hypertrophy or strength. So to gain muscle, to gain strength, to gain aerobic capacity, or if your goal is just to maintain all of those things. So here's a minimum recommendation for gains if your goal is to gain all those things. If you're an Evlo member, you could do the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday classes. So that's upper body, lower body, and mat build. Each of those classes will hit each muscle group at least once for about 4-ish sets per muscle group. We don't have a track for this. We've gotten asked a lot about this. Can you create a 3 time per week track with those 3 classes? The reason that we haven't done this is because we don't want to confuse people into thinking that volume, it will provide equivalent results as some of our more normal tracks, the 3, 4, 5 time per week track that we already have. So we don't have it as a track because it's not something that we recommend. You won't get equivalent results that you would from our other tracks. So it is a great method that you can do for yourself if you are having a time period where you're like, I can't commit. Like I can only do 3 workouts a week and I only have 30 minutes or 35 minutes per week to do each workout. You could do upper, lower, and mat build. When it comes to high intensity work, we have a ReHIT program on the membership, and this is 2 30-second sprints with breaks in between. And this would be great if you are to add, because it's very minimal time commitment. The classes are 10 minutes. So you could, if you're untrained, if you're not doing sprint interval training, you could do this 1 time per week and see great benefits. This is currently what I'm doing since I took a long break from HIT with being pregnant and postpartum. Or if you are trained and you are someone that's used to doing HIT or sprint interval training, you could take this class 2 to 3 times per week and see VO2 max gains. When it comes to aerobic exercise, so that light to moderate intensity cardio, again, 150 minutes per week of light to moderate intensity cardio, like brisk walking or hiking or biking or jogging or our steady state classes or our cardio 150 classes, that is kind of what we recommend. If you're time restricted, choose activities that elevate your heart rate more. For example, let's say you only have an hour a week to do aerobic exercise. Maybe you take 2 of our cardio 150 classes and you have where your heart rate tends to be a little bit higher in those cardio 150 classes than it would be in a walk, for example. So maybe you choose activities where your heart rate is slightly higher if you are more time restricted. Again, just do what you can. I put aerobic exercise last because although it's very important, if you are going through a season where you don't have a lot of time, I would say that you can kind of chip at this just a little bit because you are strength training, which will have cardiovascular improvements, and you are doing the sprint interval training, which will also have cardiovascular improvements. So do what you can, but I do recommend 150 minutes on a minimum if you can, or if you are going to do less, choose activities that increase your heart rate more. What if your goal is just to maintain? What if you're like, okay, I still don't have that amount of time to do 3 35-minute strength training classes, 1 10-minute HIT session, and then maybe a couple of lower intensity cardio classes per week? Here's what I would recommend. 1 hard set per week per muscle group. So just 1 hard set per week per muscle group. Now, if you want to make these workouts even shorter, choose exercises or do heavier weights for fewer reps. So that's obviously going to make your set shorter. What you could do if you're an Evlo member is take the beginning of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday classes. So take the beginning of upper body build. So the warm up, take the first set and fast forward to the cool down. And you could do that for upper body, lower body, and mat build. Again, if you want to shorten the workouts even more, choose slightly heavier weight and less reps. And that will allow you to approach muscular failure in a shorter period of time. Totally fine. You will see equal muscle growth if you're using slightly heavier weights for fewer reps or slightly lighter weights for higher reps, as long as you're approaching muscular failure in under 30 reps per set. When it comes to high intensity work, again, maybe just choosing one of those rehit classes each week. They're 10-minute classes. If you are trained and you're used to doing HIIT or sprint interval training, choose 2 of those rehit classes each week. And then aerobic exercise, same thing goes with this category as it did for the gaining category. Just get in what you can. Again, if you're time restricted, maybe choose activities where you have a slightly higher intensity or slightly higher heart rate. Now, that is a recommendation if you are going through a time period where you don't have a lot of time and energy to commit to exercise and you just need to kind of maintain. I do not recommend doing that routine for the long term. The tough reality is that as we age, we're declining. So just trying to maintain may not be enough stimulus to offset the effects of natural aging. So it's totally okay as a short-term solution if you're going through a chapter of life where you just can't commit to much, but have it as a goal to do the minimum for gains and potentially doing more like the 3, 4, or 5 time per week Evlo tracks. I hope this is helpful information to have in your back pocket as we approach the holidays and your schedule might feel a little hectic, or to have in your back pocket if you are ever going through a time period where you just need it. Remember that we can always improve our fitness. So if you have a season of life where you aren't doing the minimum amount, like maybe you're postpartum or maybe you're sick, it is okay. It's never too late, and you don't have to come back with full on intensity in order to see real benefits. Gentle consistency always wins over intense inconsistency. All right, everyone, remember that we have a free class, a free Evlo class in the show notes. If you've ever wanted to take our classes and feel what it feels like to do a hard set, we have our Foundations Upper Body Build class in the show notes. No credit card required. You can just take that. And then we also have our 14-day free trial of Evlo if you want to feel what it feels like to do this type of thing for a full week and experience the rehit and the cardio classes and all of that. This was helpful. We'll see you all next week. Same time, same place. Bye for now.